everybody. Good morning. And welcome to our 117th birthday party. My name is Theo Dews, and I'm the pastor of this church for the 51 weeks of the year that Bob Russell's not here. And you know, it's really special having Bob here today. But I need to tell you that this is a pretty special place all the time. Most of you have some connection here. Maybe you came here as a child, or maybe your parents worshiped here, or at the very least, this is the church that gave birth to your church. This is a very special church. But this church now sits in a very difficult community. We are surrounded every day by poverty and addiction and hunger and homelessness. Most of the people of this community are a lot more concerned with survival than they are with salvation. And of course, there's this one Saturday every year when the whole world pays attention to our community. That first Saturday in May, this community draws a lot of attention. But in a recent article in Leo magazine, we were called the community that Louisville forgets 364 days a year. And there's some truth to that. Ours is a forgotten community, and it is populated with a lot of forgotten people. And because of that, most of the churches in this community moved out a long time ago. There's still a few of us down here on the front lines, but most churches have moved on. Well, that only strengthened our resolve to stay right here. Amen. No matter how big the challenge, no matter how strong the enemy, we will stay right here. And we will lay our hands on the wounds of this bleeding community, and we will proclaim the name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Whatever your connection to this church is, even if this isn't your home church, you can still partner with us in this ministry. You can partner with us by praying for our ministry. You can partner with us by giving to our ministry. You can partner with us by telling others about our ministry. Yes. But as the Lord leads your help, please remember that we need your help. Bob Russell has been a good friend to this church for a very long time. Amen. And it is always a sweet thing to welcome back an old friend. Yes. So please join me in welcoming Pastor Bob Russell.
Youth, middle age, and you're looking good. I gotta say, for a 117-year-old church, you're looking good. Yes. I owe my existence in Louisville and my ministry to the things that transpired years ago in this church. If it weren't for South Louisville Christian Church, there would be no Southeast Christian Church. I wouldn't be here today. So we owe you a debt of gratitude. I enjoyed the music today, but Joey, I got to tell you, you got upstaged by this choir today. I am a big fan of Theo Dews. What a talented, loving minister and wife and family. You are blessed, and I love the fact that Theo has committed here and is ministering to this community. So we thank you for what you're doing. We hope that we'll be able to be of help to you in many, many ways, especially financially. Because this is the 117th birthday or homecoming for South Louisville Christian Church. And because I just celebrated my 76th birthday a couple of weeks ago, I'm going to preach today from Psalm 90, a sermon called Heading for Home. Now, Billy Graham, before he died, wrote a book, Nearing Home, Life, Faith, and Finishing Well. And he begins that book with this paragraph. I never thought I would live to be this old, live to be 99. All my life I was taught how to die as a Christian, but no one ever taught me how to live in the years before I die. I wish they had, because I'm an old man now, and believe me, it is not easy. You know, that's true. There are all kinds of ads on television encouraging you to prepare financially for the retirement years, but there's not much instruction about how to prepare spiritually for the last chapter of our lives. Now, I doubt I live as long as Billy Graham did, but I'm an older man now, and while I'm able, I'd like to talk with you about how we can exert maximum influence for Jesus Christ in our later years. Now, if you're much younger than I want you to listen anyway, because we're all on the same journey, and you're going to get here someday, Lord willing. Or, as I talk, you may gain some wisdom about how to relate to and understand older people. So we're going to read from Psalm 90 in the Old Testament, 90th chapter, and it's written by a man who aged well and should have some information about heading home victoriously. Now, most of us are familiar with a couple phrases in Psalm 90. Verse 10 says, we live to be 70 or 80 if we have strength. And then verse 12 says, teach us to number our days. We know those two phrases, but most are not familiar with the rest of the psalm that gives us some insight about what our attitude should be as we age. And most do not know that this psalm is not written by David. It's a psalm written by Moses. It's the only psalm that we know of that was penned by Moses, who was called by God for a special assignment. When he was 80 years old, he died at 120. So somewhere between 80 and 120, he penned these words of wisdom. And he ought to have some good instruction to us about aging with grace. Now here's the first thing I see him saying, and that is, my security is in God, and therefore I will be flexible and unthreatened by a rapidly changing world. Look what he says in verse 1. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought from the earth the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Now, Moses saw some dramatic changes take place during his lifetime, and that had to create some uncertainty for him. You think about it, he began life as a pampered prince in the palace, and then he spent 40 years as a nomad in a rugged wilderness tending sheep. And then he spent the last 40 years as a much maligned leader trying to lead 2 million slaves into the promised land. As he looked back on his tumultuous life, he saw one constant that sustained him through it all. The Lord was his dwelling place. Amen. Things changed, but God was always there. When he was born, Pharaoh had decreed that every male child was to be killed. But God was his dwelling place when his mother put him in a watertight basket and put the basket in the cattails of the Nile River, and Pharaoh's daughter found him and adopted him. God was there in that pagan palace, teaching Moses how to relate to royalty and how to lead. And even when he made a serious mistake and killed an Egyptian taskmaster and fled, God was there enabling him to escape in the desert of Midian. And after 40 years in what seemed to be a God-forsaken wilderness, he discovered God was there in the wilderness in a burning bush. God was there when he stood before Pharaoh and performed miracles. God was there when the Red Sea miraculously parted and allowed them to escape. In the wilderness when they didn't know where to go, God was there leading them by a pillar of fire at night and a cloud by day. Lord, he said, you've been our dwelling place throughout all generations. from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. I like the way the Message paraphrases it. From once upon a time, the kingdom come, you are God. Now, those of us who are over 60 here, raise your hand. We have seen some unsettling changes in our lifetime. Technology has changed so much. We've struggled to keep up with smartphones and the internet and email and insight. My kids gave me a few years ago a radio that was so complex I never learned how to turn it on. They gave me two little knobs, one to turn on the volume and one for changing the station. Moral values in our country have changed dramatically. Activity that was said to be reprehensible when I was a little boy is now endorsed as healthy. Then as we get older, our minds are not as reliable. And as Christians, we see these dramatic changes that take place in church. Piano and organ replaced by guitars and drums, hymnals with words on a screen, baptismal robes by t-shirts, leather-bound Bibles by iPads, suits and ties by jeans and sandals, and it is a little disconcerting. All these changes. But the most unsettling change is one that every generation has to face as we age. People around us die. And that creates insecurity. Moses talks about that in verse 3. He says, you turn men back to dust, saying, return to dust, O sons of men. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. You sweep men away in the sleep of death. They're like the new grass of the morning, though in the morning it springs up new. By evening it's dry and withered. When I came to Louisville Southeast Church 53 years ago, there were 7 elders. All elders are gone. All the mentors no longer here. My mother and dad died. My older sister died. A lot of friends have died. And it's unsettling when people you love are no longer here. But there's one constant that never changes. My security is in God. God, you're our dwelling place. You're our constant. You're our rock from everlasting to everlasting. And the Bible says that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He never changes. Hebrews 6:19 says, we have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Jesus, our high priest forever. Several years ago, some wildfires swept through California, much like they're doing last week, destroying a number of homes. We have some friends who work with Samaritan's Purse, and they went out to minister to some of these people who lost their homes. And they said they stood behind an elderly widow whose large home was just ashes, and there were just whiffs of smoke coming up from the ashes. And she stood there fighting back the tears, and they heard her say, I lost everything. I lost everything. And then she mused, but I still have my Jesus. And there may come a time when you lose everything that's stable for everyone, but you still have Jesus. Isaiah 46:4 says, even to your old age and gray hairs, I am He, and I am He who will sustain you. Now, since my ultimate security is in God, I will be flexible and unthreatened by a rapidly changing world. One of the problems as we grow older is that we grow resistant to change because we see it as a threat, an additional threat to our stability. And even if the change is positive, we resent it as an insult to the way we've always done things. My friend Russell Summey, who has since departed, said when he was a little boy, they got inside plumbing finally. And he said they had to keep their outhouse functioning because his grandfather lived with them and he refused to use the bathroom in the house. He would say to them, if you want to do that kind of thing in the house, that's up to you. We resist change even though it's for the better. Who wants to go back to outhouses or party line phones or black and white TVs or ice boxes or code maps or snail mail? And the same can be true of the church. Some of us who are older gripe about all the changes, and if we're not careful, we miss out on relationships and worship, but maybe more importantly, we miss out on some changes that are positive. I'll admit, I don't like all the changes in church. But I also have to say, some of the new songs are really good.
I like that.
I like In Christ Alone, or What a Beautiful Name, or Lord, I Need You. Now, I still like to sing How Great Thou Art, or Rock of Ages, but we've got to keep adapting. We've got to be flexible in methods without compromising biblical principle. There's no thing, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But I'll tell you what, if you don't learn some new tricks, you become an old dog. And our security is not in the church's music or in the preacher's dress, but in God. Psalm 46 reads, God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in times of trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall in the heart of the sea, and there's chaos in Washington, D.C. Well, it doesn't say that, but it should. Nations are enough. Kingdoms fall. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Now, before I get off this point, let me say a word to those of you who are younger. Not all change is good. Over the years, we've witnessed some innovative ideas that have turned out to be duds. Leisure suits, powdered milk, new Coke, filtered cigarettes. And the same is true in the church. We've heard about these wonderful ideas of bus ministry and weekly dramas and computer registrations. They don't work out. So if we're not super excited about the latest, greatest idea, be patient with us because we just may be right. Not all change is good, and not all tradition is bad. Some traditions, like the wedding ring, or the military salute, or standing during the national anthem, give us roots and communicate respect. So don't discard tradition too quickly. Don't make changes too fast. You be flexible too. Granted, our security isn't in tradition, but neither is it in embracing the latest passing fad, but in God. He is our dwelling place from everlasting to everlasting. Here's a second principle from Psalm 90. My sins are many, but forgiven. Therefore, I will trust God's amazing grace and not fear judgment. Reading on in Psalm 90, verse 7 says, we are consumed by your anger and terrified by your indignation. Now, why would Moses talk about my security is in God and then turn around and say we're terrified of your anger? The next phrase explains why. You have set all our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. All our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. Moses looked back over his life and he realized he committed a lot of sins. He made a lot of mistakes. Even his secret sins of killing that Egyptian and burying him in the sand, and he found out the next day on the construction site that everybody knew about it and God knew about it and had to flee for his life.
Construction site.
And you know what? Moses battled this character flaw of anger all his life and didn't always keep it under control. He came down to the base of Mount Sinai with 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments, and he saw the wild party that people were having. What did he do with those 2 tablets? He smashed them on the ground in anger. Or God told him to speak to the rock, and in anger, he took his rod and flailed away at the rock. God was not pleased. Later, in anger against people, he asked God, just wipe them out. And Moses had seen the wrath of God against the disobedience of others. When his sister Miriam criticized him for marrying a dark-skinned woman, God struck her with leprosy. And when Korah and his groupies tried to undermine Moses' leadership, God opened up the earth in a gigantic sinkhole and swallowed them all. And that's why Moses said, I realize I'm a sinner, and God, I'm terrified of your wrath. Verse 11, he says, who knows the power of your anger? For your wrath is as great as the fear that is due you. Now, the older I get as a believer, the more aware I am, my sins are many. I notice that unbelievers compare themselves with the wretches of society and they feel kind of good. But seasoned believers compare themselves with God's holiness, and we're increasingly aware of our own sin. When the prophet Isaiah went into the temple and he saw the Lord high and lifted up, his first reaction was, I'm a man of unclean lips. People will say to me, Bob, you got to be proud of the legacy that you left at Southeast Christian Church. Well, I'm very grateful. But as I look back over that, I know that many times my motives were more ego-driven than God-driven. I know there were some things that I did that weren't right, and so many things I didn't do. There were times I had secret sins in my life. I wrote a book about 18 years ago called When God Builds a Church. It's kind of the history of South Louisville Christian Church. The book did pretty well. But a few years later, there was another guy about the same time who wrote a book about his church, and it was called The Purpose-Driven Church. I can't remember the guy's name. And I saw a headline in USA Today the one day that said, Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Church sells 6 million copies. And feelings of envy came over me. I thought, 6 million copies? If he got $1 a book, that's $6 million. My church is as big as his. My book's half as good. Lord, I'd take $3 million. I look back, that is so silly. God blessed my ministry way beyond I ever dreamed or imagined. And how wrong to be jealous of somebody he blesses in a different way. People ask me, did you read Rick Warren's book on Purpose-Driven Church? It was really good. Yeah, it was really good. I didn't mean it. Now, jealousy, was just one of my secret sins. I had some others that I'd be embarrassed to tell you. In fact, I thought by the time I got to be 76 years of age, I'd be a whole lot more spiritual than I am right now. And I'm facing the fact I'm going to die a sinner. And who doesn't fear an audit from the IRS when you know there are some exaggerations in the financial record? And as you near home, know you're soon to be facing judgment. If you're not careful, you'll be terrified of God's indignation. Moses pleads in verses 13 and 14, have compassion on your servant. Satisfy in the morning with your unfailing love. Now there's a hint of hope here as we head for home because of God's compassion, because of his unfailing love. My sins are many, but they're forgiven. You see, the message of the Old Testament is we've disobeyed God's commands and we deserve hell. That is justice. But the message of the New Testament is God has paid the price for all of our sin on the cross. And even though we deserve hell, he's going to grant us heaven, and that is grace. Years and years ago, my wife and I were in a really bad automobile accident while I was preaching a revival in Pennsylvania. And my wife was pretty seriously injured. She was in the hospital for a week in this little country town, and she wasn't getting better, and I was so frustrated not knowing what to do. And Dr. Russell Summey, a man I mentioned earlier, flew a medical plane from Louisville, Kentucky, 350 miles to Meadville, Pennsylvania. They took my wife on a stretcher, put her on this plane along with me and my 2 sons, and flew us back to Louisville. And on that plane, I was so thankful that my dilemma, my frustration of not knowing what to do was being resolved by somebody who cared. And I was so grateful. I said, Russ, I know this is costly. I want to pay for this plane. He said, no, you're not paying for this plane. Second time I said, Russ, I just really obligated to you. I've got to pay for this plane. He said, not paying for this plane. Third time I said, Russ, I've got to pay for this plane. He said, I'm going to be honest with you. You can't afford it. And I found out how much it cost me. Right. But you know, I never feared that Russ was going to come back to me years later and charge me. I didn't withdraw from him because I was in debt to him. Just grateful. And the good news is, you can't afford to pay for your own sins. There are too many. But Jesus paid it all. And when he died, he said, it is finished. It is paid in full. Romans 7, Paul said, what a wretched man that I am. The good that I want to do, I don't do. The evil that I've done, shouldn't do, I've done. Who will deliver me from this body of death? And then he said, thanks be to God, who gives us the victory through Jesus Christ. And there is therefore now no condemnation to those that are in Christ Jesus. So, my sins are many, but they're forgiven. Therefore, I will trust God's amazing grace and not fear judgment. Hebrews 2:15 says Christ came to free those who all their lives are held in slavery by the fear of death. I'm not going to live the final chapter of my life fearing what it's like to die. Because I know, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? I'm not going to live the last chapter of my life fearing judgment. Because I know, though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white as snow. I'm not going to live the last chapter of my life fearing whether I'm going to live forever with God in heaven. Because he said to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. I went to visit Doris Waddell of our church when she had her 90th birthday. I said, how are you feeling? She said, I feel so good. I'm so thankful. I said, Doris, you're liable to live to be 100 years old. She said, oh, no, don't do that to me. I've got a better place to go, you know? Amen. Christians don't have a death wish, but we do have a death strategy. And we know to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. Amen. Here's the third lesson from Psalm 90. My life is brief, therefore I will rejoice and make the most of this day. Verse 10 says, the length of our days is 70 years, or 80 if we're strong. Yet their span is but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. Verse 12 says, teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Now the obvious teaching of this paragraph is life is brief. Moses said the average lifespan is 70 or 80 years. And generally speaking, the last decade is full of physical trouble and more emotional sorrow. Now Moses was the exception. He lived to be 120, and the Bible says when he climbed Mount Nebo to die, his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. Moses still had 20/20 vision at 120. Still able to be a mountain climber. That's not the norm. Because usually after we get 70, we have to battle arthritis and aches and pains and heart problems and replacement surgeries. And then they quickly pass and our spirits fly away. You know, when we're young, 70 years seems like a long time. But you get to be my age and look back and say, wow, it passed fast. The Bible says, we're a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. A couple of years ago, my little grandson said, Pop, how old are you? I said, I'm 74. He said, wow, and you're still alive. Now Moses is saying, life is brief. And if you're fortunate to live to be 70, then make the most of them. He's not saying, count how many days you have left because nobody knows when you're going to die. He's saying, understand your days are numbered. You're mortal. They're numbered by God. Therefore, make every day count. Let's gain wisdom with every passing day. That doesn't happen automatically. You can get older and get dumber. Have you seen that new ad by Ron Reagan, the president's son? He's of the, he begins the ad, and it is for the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And he begins the ad by saying, my name is Ron Reagan, and I am an unashamed atheist. And he closes by saying, I am not afraid of burning in hell. Now that's so sad. I hope he repents, but he's 61 years old, and there's no fool like an old fool. And I'm not wrong calling him a fool because the Bible says what? A fool says in his heart, no God. Just because you age doesn't mean you gain wisdom. But Moses said, Lord, teach us the number of our days so that we may grow wiser, not more foolish. And then he says, satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. My life is brief, therefore I will rejoice and make the most of today. Let's not be old geezers who pine for yesterday. Well, life's just not as much fun as it used to be. You know, I wish I were back in my good old days. I was slim and beautiful. I used to hit it a lot further than I hit it today. I used to be a leader in the church, but nobody shows me any respect anymore. There's a song that says, yesterday's gone, tomorrow may never come, but we have this moment today, so let us rejoice and be glad. Amen. Moses said in verse 15, make us glad for as many days you have afflicted us. As many days we've seen, as many days you've afflicted us, we're supposed to be glad. Yeah, we're to rejoice in all circumstances. In Deuteronomy 32, there's a passage that says, as an eagle stirs up her nest and spreads abroad her wings to teach her young to fly, so does God lead us. When it's time for the eagle to get out of the nest, the mother eagle takes out the rabbit's fur and the lamb's wool and makes it prickly in there, and they got to begin to exercise their wings. And they can't get comfortable in there anymore. It's time for them to get out and fly. And the older we get, the more uncomfortable we get in this tent. And there are aches and pains, we have trouble getting comfortable, and God is just reminding us there's going to come a day pretty soon, get out and fly. Amen. So you don't have a future that you can point to 100 years from now, but you got today. And if you really believe what you say you believe, rejoice and be glad. It is an inspirational Christian who can, in their older years, make the most of every day. Theo, we used to have a friend in Lexington, Wayne Smith. I don't know whether you ever met Wayne Smith. One of the funniest guys I've ever known. No, he lived to be 86. When he's 85, I went to visit him in a nursing home in Lexington. And he comes down the hallway with his walker. He said, Bob, I can barely walk anymore. I can't preach anymore. But he said, I do water aerobics 3 times a week. The doctor wants me to keep exercising, so I do water aerobics. It's me and 4 other women my age. I said, Bob, if you ever had a problem with lust, you wouldn't there. I love older people who know how to laugh. And if anybody ought to be able to rejoice and be glad because God's given us today, we should, because the best is yet to be. Now let me say another word to those of you who are younger. Include some older people in your circle of casual friends. Titus 2 says the older Christians are to mentor the younger. We can't mentor you if you're so insecure that you've got to be only with people your age and you run away from us all the time. And we can't mentor you if you're so arrogant you think you're smarter and you never listen. Leviticus 19:32 says, rise in the presence of the aged, show respect for the elderly, and revere the Lord your God. You may know more about computer technology than your grandfather, but I guarantee you he knows more about life than you. You may know more about fashion than your grandmother. I guarantee you she knows more about putting on the whole counsel of God, the whole armor of God than you do. So Job 12:12 says, is not wisdom found among the aged? Does not long life bring understanding? I was taught as a young boy by my mother, you always be nice to older people. You know why? You're going to be an older person someday. And what goes around comes around. And the way when you reap what you sow, the way you treat older people is probably the way you'll be treated. And if God allows you to live, you're going to be older someday. You reap what you sow. So include some older people among your casual friends. You may gain some invaluable wisdom. You may discover they're more fun to be with than some of the spoiled brats you've been running around with. I say that in Jesus. Here's the last thing I want us to look at. My contribution still matters. Therefore, I will focus on what is vital. He says in verse 16, may your deeds be shown to your servants, your splendor to their children. May the favor of the Lord rest upon us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Now look at that. Moses, 80 years old plus. He's saying, establish the work of my hands. May your favor rest upon me so I can leave a legacy about your splendor to the children who are following me. We're inclined to think in America, when we get to be 65 years of age, our influence is over. Time to quit work, time to drop out of the leadership of the church, turn it all over to young people and sit back and do nothing. Well, there is a time to change pace. But the Bible is full of examples of people God used significantly when they were old. Sarah was 90 years old when she gave birth to a baby. I'm not suggesting you try that. God uses it. Caleb was 85 when he lived a military battle in the hill country. Barzillai was 80 when he provided food and shelter for the fleeing David. Anna was 84 when she identified the baby Jesus as the Messiah. The Apostle John's probably in his 90s when he writes the book of Revelation. So here's my final application. My contribution still matters. If Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are running for president, they're both in their 70s, what makes us think we're supposed to quit Christian service at that age? Your next chapter, the next few years, may be the greatest contribution that you can make. Billy Graham writes this book after he's 90, impacts me. The Bible says, you be faithful unto death, and I'll give you a crown of life. That means we have to stay focused on what is vital. Let's not stand before God someday, and God's going to say, what'd you do with the last 15 years of your life? Well, I got this great collection of seashells I found on New Island. Or I tell you what, I can remember, I've got almost every episode of Andy Griffith memorized. You can examine my front yard. There's not a dandelion in the front yard. Stay focused on what matters for eternity, on the things of the Spirit. Several years ago, I went to a widow in our church, 65 years old, and I knew she had some resources. And I said, we got a young man who's going to be a sophomore in Bible college, and his dad just lost his job, and he can't go back to Bible college because they have no money now. Could you help him? That student called me 3 days later and said, you won't believe it. She offered not just to pay for my whole tuition this year, but pay me all the way through. And today he's in ministry because an older widow with resources said, I'm going to help out. Some of you here have heard this appeal of the mother church needing some assistance. If you've got resources, don't support love. Be willing to share. Have a sense of what is vital. Or maybe you don't have resources. You can take the time to write a meaningful letter to each of your grandchildren. Say, don't own this until I die. And when you die, they'll open it, they'll read it. Or take your grandchildren out to eat, one by one. If you don't have your grandchildren, you adopt somebody in church, and you talk to them about what you believe and why. Or take them to an amusement park. Or take them to a concert. You say, they won't go. You buy, they'll go. You take the initiative. Go on a mission trip. Jane Summey of our church, 86. She just got back from Myanmar.
Oh my God.
Talk to somebody about the Lord. My mother's 83, beginning with dementia when she went to see my cousin Deanie Lynn, won her to Christ. Don't quit. You be an inspirational example to others of what it's like to live in the final years. About 3 months before I retired, I spoke at a large church in Washington, D.C. I knew no one except the preacher barely, and he was out of town. And after the second service, I met the executive pastor, and I said to him, I'm about to retire here in 3 months. He said, really, how old are you? I said, I'm 62. He said, I guess this letter's for you. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, a woman I never met came up to me after the first service, and she said, I was awakened in the middle of the night, and I got a message, I believe, from the Lord, and it's for somebody who's about 62 and about to retire. And he said, I don't know who you're talking about. She said, you'll know. So he hands me this letter. I'm going to read it to you. This is 13 years ago. A word for someone on the verge of retirement, perhaps just turning 62. This person has been thinking, I can rest, retire, and do some things I've wanted to do. I felt the Lord wanted to say to this person, no, you're about to enter a time in your life where I have a task for you to do, something for you to embark on in my service. And all the work you've been doing up until this point has really just been preparation for the new work that I'm calling you to do. So get ready and prepare yourself for your real work and purpose in life is just beginning really to begin. It's not the path you would have chosen, but it's one that is fitted to who I've made you to be. This labor I'm calling you to will make an eternal difference in the lives of men. I'm telling you, put goosebumps on my mind. I was back in that church about 3 years ago, and a woman came up to me and said, what have you been doing with your life? I said, well, I'm actually preaching more now than I ever did. I just don't have to write as many new sermons. And I write a blog every week. And you won't believe it, but I do this mentoring retreats for preachers. And I have done 100 mentoring retreats. If you'd have told me when I retired that I'd do 100 mentoring retreats and it would never get old, I would have never believed it. And I'm the woman who wrote that note. Nothing like that's ever happened to me before. She said, I just wondered what you're doing. And she wasn't good. But it was God's signal to me, don't quit.
Yes.
And I don't care how old you are right now. As long as you have breath, God has a purpose for your life.
Amen.
Say with Moses, I'm going to live every day to the fullest. I'm going to rejoice and be glad and make the most of the day.
Amen.
Moses climbed Mount Nebo and died. And let's keep climbing until the day that God calls us home. Thank you.
Amen.
Bob, thank you so much.
Yes. Amen.
Thank you. Guys, we have had a lot of really good cooks in this